Me.
It's him.
To you?
Mhm.
No, I don't think it is. Oh, no. Yes.
Vice chair.
Nobody. Oh, now
Isn't it
What?
saying no?
That is weird. Why is it not showing everybody?
Hey, I made everybody.
That's spooky.
I didn't realize how bald I was.
I didn't.
It happens. You see yourself in the mirror. I was like,
I've never had this happen before.
You just see yourself in a very
Frozen.
different light. I don't know if you have listened to yourself.
Oh, yeah.
But that was just even more weird. Yes.
Hi,
So
Lori.
that's what everybody sees when they see me, huh?
Not really. We never know.
And it's
what they
black
think.
on Zoom.
Self-perception.
Yeah, I know.
Looks like the camera's the issue.
Good.
That's why I
Sunshine.
let sunshine
Should
in
be
my
happy
life all
about
the
it.
time. I just don't like strangers in my life that I don't.
Well, I
Well,
think we're having
let me
camera
speak.
issues, but the Zoom world can hear us. If you want to continue, they can hear us. They just can't see us.
Fine.
I don't know why or what's going on with the camera.
I guess with that, we'll call to order this City of Bowling Green, Ohio's Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, November 3rd, 2021. Please call the roll.
Here.
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 Approval of the minutes. Does anybody have any changes to effect on the previous minutes? Being none, we'll move to lobby visitation. Is there anybody present who'd like to speak to the Planning Commission?
Bill?
That's a negative.
Did we officially approve the minutes? I'm sorry, I blinked out there. Did we all say
We
aye?
all
and-
said no. And I guess we
Okay.
approve the minutes.
Okay, making sure.
And I guess with that, we'll close lobby visitation and move to the rezoning request for 39.78, give or take, acres located between the addresses of 2111 and 2301 East Wooster Street, identified as parcel number B07-511-210000000800 from B2 General Commercial Zoning Classification to M3 Business Park Zoning Classification. BG East LLC et al. Applicants. There do we,
If you would, set that for a public hearing for your next meeting, which would be December 1st.
I just have a comment about that. I'd be interested in hearing from the applicant or the city in December about whether it aligns.
Sure, absolutely.
we will set that for the public hearing, our next meeting, December 1st, 2021. Next, we usually go through our reports given by Ms. Ennis, but he is not here.
I can do that. So at their last meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals, October 13th, Donald Ralston of 628 Cedar Lane requested a variance to allow the construction of an 8x8 accessory building. It would encroach 4 feet into the 5-foot required rear yard setback to the south, 4 feet into the 5-foot required side yard setback to the east, and 3 feet into the 10-foot required setback from the primary structure. Pardon me. That was on a corner lot, and that was approved. And then Dennis Platt of 311 South Prospect Street requested a variance to allow the construction of a 6-foot by 16-foot accessory building that would encroach 1 foot 4 inches into the 5-foot required side yard setback to the north, and that was also approved. So only 2 cases.
We have any reports from the planning department?
I do. Here's the handout there. I don't think I've given one for a couple months. So I just want to give an update on some things that are going on, of course, and permits. We are up on permits still. So right now we're at 397 zoning permits compared to 369 this time last year. We've had 21 single-family housing starts compared to 17 at this time last year. And then we have had, excuse me, one industrial, which was the electric substation that's going on right now at Bremen Bishop. That was started. And then we've had one industrial in 2020, excuse me. And then we've had one commercial in 2020, but none so far in 2021. And then we had one institutional in 2020 and 0 institutional in 2021. So we've issued quite a bit of permits since we've last reported. So Precision Alloy Services, they had an addition at 760 Innovation Drive. That's an industrial building. We've had Clean Water Services, another industrial building. They have an addition at 1394 Bellard Drive that was approved. Pinnacle Plastics, they just started a small addition in the front. They're at 513 East Napoleon Road. Hartung Brothers did some site alterations at 815 South Dunbridge. Again, the substation, already reported on that at 1460 Brim Road. And then Black Swamp Players, which is in the downtown district, they are doing an addition in front along with an ADA ramp at 115 East Oak Street. Currently under review or on hold. We still have the Bowling Green Healthcare Real Estate, new construction on South Dunbridge on hold, but we're pretty close to issuing that permit likely this week. Subdivisions, we are reviewing the construction plans for Stonebrook that you had reviewed that preliminary plan not too long ago. So that will take a little bit of time, but I think you'll probably see that final plat fairly soon after that, or at least once they get their construction plan started, we'll see how far they get, and then likely 2022. As far as the zoning code, still working on that. We had our presentation on October 11th, and so thank you for those able to attend and listen in on that. We do have a website for that, and the presentation, if anybody wants copies, we brought some extra copies of that. I also have a discussion topic after I'm done with this that I want to run by you and get some initial feedback about. Hopefully we'll have a full draft by the end of the year. That's our goal. Again, this is a really down in the weeds document, and we're not yet sure how we're going to handle that public review process, but it definitely, will be out in the public, hopefully by the end of the year, if not sooner. Also wanted to give you an update, and maybe Joe Phillips could do this better than I could, but Court Street is really going to look much different, we think, when BGSU demolishes their administration building. And, it's basically where Court and Thurston intersect. So I think that will be an exciting opportunity as we continue to work together with the university of what that could look like. And really, we've had some visioning there, some ideas that came out of the future land use plan and the community action plan. So again, another critical corridor that we really want to concentrate on. Just want to give you an update about the American Rescue Plan Act. I know you've probably read some articles about the city paving quite a bit of streets with that money, which is great news. There's also some potential ideas for having a side use path that gets paved at City Park, also from the community center to the high school, and then the Cogan's Crossing subdivision. And then studying the impact of changing downtown right away to allow for extended use of sidewalks outside of stores and restaurants, especially for dining. So again, just sharing some of those ideas with you as the Planning Commission. Okay, so there's a couple of issues that we've been working through with the zoning code and the consultant zone co. And we're just looking for some initial feedback to incorporate into the zoning code. So two topics that really, again, this all relates back to the comprehensive plan and recommendations on updating the zoning code. So a couple areas they felt a little bit stuck on and wanted some initial feedback is, okay, topic number one, off-street parking. So some of you might think, what does that mean? Well, right now our zoning code requires that depending on the use, depending on the zoning, depending on the size of the building, that you have to have X amount of spaces. So I gave you some examples. So an industrial building right now is required to have parking based on the peak shift of employees. So if your business has 25 employees, peak shift, you have to provide 25 parking spaces on your property for your business. Or if you have 3 employees, you're required to have 3. So that's how the code reads now. Another example is a single family dwelling right now is required to have 2 parking spaces. So a driveway, is likely suitable for 2 cars. Another example is a restaurant. They're required to have 15 parking spaces for the first 1,000 square feet, and then 1 additional space for each 100 square feet over that. And so I think it's no secret that we talked about that it's a lot of parking in some scenarios here that often will need a variance or they just can't occupy a building. So in relation to this is the community action plan. So there is a recommendation in the plan to reduce parking in the R4 and R5. So again, the consultants realize that not only is staff telling them we think we have an issue, but also the community action plan says to relook at our parking requirement. So what Zone Co is thinking is that, or recommending, I should say, is that the city consider removing the minimum off-street parking requirements, period. No parking requirements. So what I did was give you some of their thoughts behind this. And also there's several planning related articles that a lot of communities are looking to do that for several reasons. So it doesn't mean that a business owner is going to build a building and not have parking. I mean, we want to rely more on that owner to know their business model and what they need for parking. So a lot of it is, is the local government going to tell somebody how many parking spaces they need? Is that most appropriate? So, and it's more sustainable, to have the less parking that you build, the hope is that's grass or not, it's a pervious surface basically instead. So we still would have parking requirements per se when it comes to buffering and screening and the size of spaces and the aisle width for safety and access. But they're proposing that we just consider removing the actual parking requirement. So I'm not going to read over every detail, but I wanted to give you some considerations that came from the consultant and some articles we've read. And the new trend is that several communities are doing this, and so far it is working. Now, some of those tend to be larger cities, but they are seeing more smaller size cities do this, and it does seem to be successful. Some of the larger cities, they'll say, okay, we're going to do that for maybe a high industrial user and they're downtown, and try it first, and then not necessarily just blankly get rid of them all and see how it works. So there's different ways to do that. But for now, they're really considering, again, getting rid of that minimum requirement. And then we give you an article for a resource if you do want to look at that article about people basically planning for people over parking.
Or you could just talk to current business owners that have more parking spaces.
Right. Yep, absolutely. I think there's no denying we want to reduce those. We're just
yeah.
struggling with, is the community okay with considering removing them
This would've been
altogether?
Really nice a few years ago when I opened parking. So many parking spots per family, per child.
Right, absolutely.
And they're
Yep,
not even there. Pick up and drop off.
right.
I know you gave me an
Mhm.
example of industrial, but you're talking
Mhm.
all.
Absolutely. It'd be all. Yep. And surely there's benefits to all, and maybe you'll think of some disadvantages. I mean, there's no perfect scenario, but we want to do it, what's right for Bowling Green. What do we think is right for Bowling Green? And, anytime a code passes doesn't mean it's set in stone forever. I mean, it's always something that can be passed and then looked at later and, see how it goes.
Well, I think that you also have, as far as the parking goes, you probably also have proof in the variances that you have. People have applied for variances for parking. For how many? Probably have thousands of variances for parking, saying this is too much, we don't have the space, it's taking over the property, right?
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't say thousands, but yeah, we've definitely had some over the
I
years.
mean, since
Absolutely.
1975,
Sure.
that's how
Oh,
long
right.
it's been. Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Right,
Yes.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
Heather, and if I remember correctly, probably a suspect, sitting on both of those committees. Wasn't there some discussion about potential for parking garage that gets us maybe down that road? I don't know.
Sure. I mean, that definitely is something to take consideration when it comes to public lots already available. If there's already on-street parking available, why do you need more off-street parking? Businesses that are complementary to each other, why do you need a huge, lot for yourself if it's only, packed 8 to 5 and the restaurant next door is open 5 to midnight and they could use it, just being more creative with
And
in the
I can
best use of
provide a
land.
real life example. I mean, our Market Square
Mm.
project, do not provide any on-site parking for residents. We've got 60 apartments on the second level. They have no parking on site. Mine, they're the first ones that up. They figured out we have some off-site parking that we allow them to use just because we have some places that are close proximity that they can park, but it's still a couple blocks away. But they figured it out.
That's a great example because you as a business owner took care of that. I mean, it wasn't the
That
city
was
of
the whole
Bowling Green
reason we
telling
had
you.
to get the rezoning because we didn't have enough parking for property. Obviously, it changed it now to the 5 day. They figured out.
It's a good example of also right now, we do not have parking requirements for the downtown central business district. There are none. So, I mean, that could be considered maybe a step one of how has that worked? I mean, there are obviously several public parking lots.
Yeah.
So,
But I do think we also have to think, and I was actually, before this, I was in Omaha, Nebraska, and they really were pushing very hard for parking over, people over parking there, because, you know, the lesser parking people walk, they spend more time there. You know, it also kind of concentration of stuff increases rather than the urban sprawl, because, you know, people like to be around where businesses. But I think we also have to think about accessibility, right? So if we don't have parkings, do we have sidewalks which are clean? Because in the winters, if the sidewalks don't get clean, then, you know, people will not be able to walk or may even injure themselves. I think also we have to think about, you know, what are other alternate methods in which people can get along, if they, do we have public transport to think about, right? So say somebody who is disabled, how will those people get along? And I think these are some important considerations to think about, that we want to be inclusive rather than just think about from an economic perspective of how can we increase the land use.
any other initial thoughts? I mean, are you think this is crazy and don't even think about it, or? I mean,
I think it's absolutely necessary. I don't want to throw it away, but I think we have to be cognizant of, really, we have two issues. We can't have a blanket statute on the whole city, obviously, with the downtown not having any parking required now. I get that. On the flip side, we need more parking downtown. But yes, we want people to walk, we want people to stay, but we also don't want to draw from a mile around downtown. We want to pull people in from, you know, for our restaurants, for our businesses, from that need to drive, that aren't going to walk from Portage or whatever. You know, it's not possible. We're not a big city where we have that many people right downtown already. At the same time, it makes no sense to have 1,000 parking spaces in a building that doesn't need it. So we need to find that balance, and I don't have an answer right now, but that's going to be, because I think we need more parking. I think we need less parking outside of downtown.
so right now,
I'd drive
technically,
that.
we don't have parking downtown as far
Right.
as the requirements.
Well, I know
So,
what I mean by requirement. I mean, just as a city, we need more. If we want more people to spend more time downtown, and we don't want to just have the same people that live from, I don't know, whatever road, Maple, pick one, you know, and closer, how are we going to get those people there? You know, people going to walk from the west side of Bowling Green, from Westgate, Stone Ridge, downtown? I don't think so. I think that's really unlikely. I don't care how pristine the sidewalks. They're going to
That's what you
drive.
were saying, Mark,
Yeah.
about parking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if we had something for outsiders, I mean, university's right there, obviously. Walk from Cincinnati. Walk. So you can't park on campus. And you get towed. So
I think you
Well,
were
it's, you know,
on
no.
that trip, Kent, when we went
Mhm.
to Kent, we did
Yeah.
sort of similar to what you guys did
Great city.
today. And that was a big of their revitalization and all that down there was that parking garage.
Mhm.
And attached to maybe like a conference center too,
Yes.
or some multi-use stuff. And
so
for a long
our-
time, I thought that's
Is it-
that's a big. I thought that was interesting. Worked really well.
and it looks nice. Look,
And on the surface, I'm in favor of what
Yeah.
you're throwing out here. Like, I like that. Obviously, like that. A lot of consider, but we've all seen prohibitive.
yeah, we appreciate that. We're just looking at, what barriers seem to exist now that can influence whether a building is occupied or not. And that tends to be a large barrier, especially when it comes to restaurants. They need quite a bit of parking. And, things have changed so much since the 1975 zoning code. I mean, people do walk, people do want to ride their bike, and people don't get their driver's license. I know I have friends that their kids don't want to drive, at least not yet, and they're 18, 19. So it's just a different world. So we talked about also, at some point, the more automated vehicles and the more of the DoorDash, and we have robot. It just, times are changing where not everybody's driving. And so are we accommodating with that change? But then also trying to put less barriers in getting buildings occupied. So,
And keep in mind, it's not just restaurants. I have a business downtown on Court Street. If we put a bike lane in there, I have no parking for my 80-year-old lady who wants to come in and visit my business. So that, yeah, need a balance, need somewhere for people to park. But people are still gonna drive.
yeah,
matter
the
how much-
difference is the city's saying, we don't want to tell you what you need for your business. That's why we're just trying to
Right.
test it, is that,
And again, at the
should we have
downtown,
to
it's
tell
not-
you?
The business itself doesn't need to have parking for the zoning code, but the
Mhm.
business itself, parking, goes hand in hand. You have to have it. And it's not gonna be, paving, knocking a building down and paving it. Yeah,
It's up to the city.
somewhere. Yeah, we gotta have somewhere
What
for those
you're
people to go if we
getting at.
want anybody to visit. Yeah, so we find a way to do everything.
Yeah, and I also feel like, we also want to see the flip side of it. What happens in communities where there is no park, right? Like, just to have a balanced argument from both ends and what will work for us, because it often is like, yeah, this seems to be the trend. I mean, but is that really has happened? People still drive, and I think people will still drive. And, but what happens in case if you just don't put those restrictions on businesses? I mean, it is possible that they will just not have any parking whatsoever. And how does that impact the city? And I think it's good to have a counter argument, at least from an intellectual perspective, to know both sides of it.
Mhm. Well, it's definitely evolved for a reason. I will tell you that in the planning world. There's a lot of articles about there, how it's become so problematic and parking is very expensive. I mean, I think there's two people in this room you could talk to about how expensive parking is, especially from a city standpoint and affording that and maintaining it. So again, it's just the idea of, should the city tell private property owners how many spots they need based on what business they want to put in their building?
Where
Right. Yep. So again, there would still be requirements. It just wouldn't be a formula. It would just be, we want it to look nice. If you are going to do a parking lot, we want it to look nice and have the buffering, and depending on location.
still
It's
have-
much
you
more
still have to meet
complicated.
ADA, So.
Right. And that's a
You're gonna
federal
fit all
regulation.
that.
Right. So give it some thought. I mean, if you have any other feedback, feel free to email me. It's just one of those loops. They really want to kind of get some initial feedback and then,
So what's
Take the
your
recommendations.
plan with giving us what you plan forward?
I will provide what your thoughts are to the consultant as a recommendation. So
I think we should scrap them.
clearly I'm for that, but I'm just one person
Scrap the
that.
parking requirement.
But I'm assuming that we are speaking for the people right here. As a planning commission, we are speaking for the citizens, and I'm also wondering what is citizens' feedback about it. So I don't know if we have this information in the community plan or not, or what generally perception is. If we can tap into all that, rather than we deciding it, I think it would be good to get feedback from the people.
Yeah, and you're
Right.
definitely not deciding it. We're just asking for a recommendation, kind of that initial feedback, so they can finish drafting that portion of that code to share soon to the public.
And
So-
when would you like us to?
I think within a week or so would be nice, if that's not too much timing. I mean, I don't think we need to overthink it. I think we just wanted some initial thoughts, and I know it's a lot to absorb. But again, we really appreciate just that initial feedback and what may or may not be possible. Okay, so the second topic is, they're called accessory dwelling units. So I don't know if you're all familiar with that terminology. They've been called accessory apartments, second units, granny flats. It's basically having an additional living space on the same parcel, normally with the owner. So the primary residence, and then maybe you're renting out your back garage, or maybe you wanted to build something separate for, to take care of elderly parents or a disabled child. That, it can be affordable housing. There's a lot of our other communities that have tried to use those as affordable housing and for other benefits. They're actually, I included an article about them so you could read more about the use. And on the back, I gave you some renderings of what they could look like. Actually, AARP is one of the organizations that really have been pushing ADUs as a way, again, to keep parents close, or those elderly who need additional care, but they don't want to be in a facility. So there's a lot of uses to them, a lot of benefits, and that article describes more to it. But why we're bringing this up is that, the current zoning code doesn't allow that. If they exist now, it's because they're a legal non-conforming use. But the community action plan and the future land use plan, they both have recommendations for the city to allow these. So that's why we feel like it has to be a conversation in the community that needs to be hashed out, whether you think ADUs should be allowed. Now, with the draft that we showed you a few weeks ago, there are some residential districts that they're proposing to have 2-unit dwellings already. So this would be more in consideration of the actual residential district where they would only allow one primary structure on the lot. So I know this is a lot to absorb, but they are recommending that, again, you give us some initial feedback and then consider, are ADUs a desired option in the city? And if so, in what zoning district or areas of the city do you think they should be allowed? And if so, if you think they would be a valuable asset to the community to have, what kind of conditions may you want to place on those? Square footage, location on the lot. And the goal would really not to be having to get zoning board approval every time you have something like this. It would be, if you want to allow it, that it would have some sort of conditions. That way it could be done administratively. The goal is not to keep, continually to funnel all these uses to the zoning board. So again, I know it's a lot to think about. I gave you one article, but if you just Google ADUs or granny flat, you will get so many articles. I know they're very popular in California. I'm not trying to compare us to California, but they have very specific design codes and regulations because, again, it's about affordable housing there, and they clearly have housing that's very expensive. But they've trickled down all over the country, again, for many benefits. Often young families do not have down payments for homes. Maybe you want to supplement your income because you want to buy a house, but you can't make it work. So there's a lot of different benefits to them, but there's also going to be some cons that I'm sure you'll think about. It's a little bit more challenging, I think, in a college town, and the fears are there, the student housing and, founded or unfounded. It's just, again, we have to plan for Bowling Green and what you all think is best. But I'm going to repeat myself. We're trying to follow our comprehensive plan and those recommendations and funnel those out to the community for input.
How many illegal non-conforming or legal non-conforming? Like I know, like North Prospect, there's houses on North Prospect that have apartments above garages.
Mhm.
There's some on West.
Sure.
Like there's certain.
We already have some
ADUs.
ADUs, correct?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's like you think there's 10, 50, like do you have any idea or no?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I mean, honestly, minimum 50, if not
Because
more.
honestly, the only ones you would really know about is if it's a separate building on that property, correct?
Most of them are separate. Like there'll be a garage and then there'll be an apartment.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, because when I applied for my attached garage, they said no at first,
Right.
remember? Well, I don't know if you were here, but because they thought that's what I was doing. I said, no, a garage for my car.
Mm-hmm.
And
They
like,
thought you rented
they
out.
thought I was gonna rent it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because right now we don't allow any residential, right? And accessory
Unless it's grandfather.
structures. Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Correct.
I'd be interested in both other college towns,
Do
just
this, yeah.
generally, but particularly in Ohio. I think
That's a good question. Yeah, we
I
can.
am generically
get out of
very
control.
pro ADU,
Yeah.
but as applied to town that's already
Right.
60%, I am concerned functionally that these are going to suddenly all pop up on the side, right?
And there'll be a lot of push.
Right.
From
Because you can't
individuals
just
on that
say,
side of
you're
town.
not
for sure.
stipulating who can live in them, correct? I mean, obviously.
Oh,
You're just
no.
saying, go ahead and, should we allow that or should we not on the same parcel? Is that what you're saying?
Right. But they're, asking if so, what kind of conditions would you
Correct.
want? Yeah.
If we, could we have it, like if, I think it's straightforward. If we, I don't know how many options there are in the proposed zoning code, but limited to certain areas of town or not allow it in certain areas of town.
Yes. And I think that's one of their questions,
Yeah.
As you get
basically.
farther away from the university, maybe allow it, because that probably not be a college rental.
Right,
It's far enough away.
Yeah.
Like they can't walk to class.
Right.
right,
I
yeah.
think you can have
There's
Gary would increase.
increased value of property. Is that what you said?
I think it would increase.
Yeah, I think it would too. Increased.
You're allowing
Have
someone to live there. and allowing-
So, does the city revenue
I-
increases
that
or
would-
decreases if we do this?
that
How does,
as
how does this help
county
the city?
manager.
Come.
Sorry, I'm trying to,
Yes.
we're having offside conversations there.
Sorry.
So he had a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering, how does this help city? So I can understand from, say, if you have seen parents living, there are different circumstances it could be. How does this help city?
Yeah, well, I mean, anytime you have, more residents, if we're also working here and collecting more revenue, that's the best case scenario. And if it makes property worth more, it's going to increase your property taxes and what you're paying.
Yeah, I'll say I'm in probably spot. Consider this. Starting to get older and then far away. This is the type of thing. That's why I say I love this. Take advantage of it personally,
Exactly, me too. I have
but
an
from a-
entire
from a BG
backyard that has
perspective,
plenty of
yeah.
room to build a whole nother house on that could provide.
But I guess what I mean to say.
Yeah,
is
no, I know.
What keeps it would help keep me. I
Right.
think that close.
Or move your family.
Yeah, I mean, I think there could be several other issues along with it. But on that note, I think like I live on Main Street and the house next to me, it's rental and I don't know how many people live, right? So there could, in the existing, there could be several people living and, there's a whole discussion about rental inspection and stuff like that. But does having additional put already in pressure on the infrastructure, like water and sewer and stuff like that?
Well,
I
they'd
don't
have to
think for
pass
that.
all the inspections. I mean, you ever built anything in Wood County?
No.
Well,
just-
then you won't have to worry about that because Mike will.
Yeah, no, I mean, where I'm getting from, I guess, in crudely put is like, you don't want it to be totally unplanned and becomes like a slum.
Right, which is what I think they're saying. I think Nate, right? You were saying if we did it on a side where it really was like a dwelling for a parent or a grandparent or something versus an additional college.
Yeah, well, there's two elements. I think that he's bringing. One is where we would allow it in
Right.
town if it was allowed. And then two, it'd still have to be done, within with inspections and all the rest, meaning,
Right.
you're not just gonna be slapping on, I don't know, the slum, I guess, what
Yeah,
you kind of
good way to
refer,
put it.
just
Yeah.
haphazardly adding on things. So in that respect, if we get specific enough about, theoretically, I don't know, make them be attached or not in a basement because you can't see what's going on. For a variety of reasons, you could kind of pick and choose just based on what would make more sense. We could really theoretically narrow it down to certain square footage even, as long as it meets these requirements, then it can be,
Yeah,
easily done, done without further inquiry. But I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I've fleshed that out in my brain, but
But weren't you saying, like, as far as your neighbor goes, there's supposed to be regulations already in place about not that many people living in that.
yeah, no, I mean, when I look at all this, I kind of think of from the lowest denominator, right? It can also be always used over profit over everything else, right? So they're already, not all the houses are safe for people to live and all that kind of stuff. But then in top of it, now you're looking for opportunity that people will buy and put more and more additional units because they can. So
Plus
I,
plus the fact that there are large amounts. A lot of property held by
Yes.
ostensibly take advantage of this double the, density.
Well, and that's why you usually say you have to live on the property. It has to
Yeah.
be the owner in the main house. That's generally a condition that I've seen across the board.
Right.
So that
which
eliminates
works
that.
until, well, how does that function then when the original owner then sells the house? And then you have two units, someone else, but I mean, I guess still exist, obviously.
Right.
The
Mhm.
new
And in
owner
order
would
to
have
have
live
another
in.
family in there,
Mhm.
that'd be tricky to.
that was,
Say do that, but yeah.
yeah, that
It
was
was
also.
And it
rental
would no
inspections,
longer be
though.
able to be a dwelling, and they do, no longer.
But it wouldn't be a separate. Wouldn't be separate in that respect.
Correct.
It wasn't. owner-occupied.
Right.
That'd be all one.
Right,
Or
exactly.
ignored or unused,
right.
yeah.
If the owner sold it, then the tenant would have to move out as well, and then it would become a dwelling.
Right.
So,
Yeah, but I mean, it just puts a lot of pressure on the city to go and see and,
Yes.
you know, and the whole argument against inspection is that city doesn't have the infrastructure to do so. So now you're,
Right.
but so I don't, I'm not aware, but what if somebody runs an Airbnb? Will that be okay?
That's a good question. We've talked about that a while. You know, we do have a bed and breakfast ordinance. I mean, it's not, I don't know if it's necessarily apples to apples because, you know, it's normally you're renting a whole home versus a room. So this doesn't really factor into that. That's another topic, I would say, more of a short-term rental versus a long-term rental topic. So I'm not really sure that answers your question, but it definitely
I could
does
see-
not really
I
relate to
could see
that.
it being more of like an type thing.
Okay.
That could be something the city doesn't want. Have dozens of garages. I could see
Commercial use at
those
that
things.
point.
What's
Right,
that?
right.
Getting towards a commercial use at that point. Bring into business. Instead of residence.
People do that though here. I know somebody who did
Yeah.
it, had a Airbnb, it was unintended use and so.
And
I-
they
I-
actually could rent out their house, keep it
No.
occupied in Bowling
Yeah.
Green, Ohio on an Airbnb.
Mhm. No, like they lived there and they had an Airbnb too.
Okay. There's the man.
Yeah, and they're demand for a few days, games and stuff like that.
Okay.
They're-
Like
Okay.
in
University.
Ann Arbor.
Yep,
Big
do it
houses
all the
next to the
time.
stadium.
Sure.
For like 5
Sure.
for the
Mhm.
take a vacation and
Yeah,
I would too for 5.
I get it. I just, yeah.
And it's
just
not also
football's got a ways to
economic.
go.
Some people just like to have new people in their house,
Yeah.
you know, just more company too. So I think they're-
Socialization.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think it can be controlled a little better. You made it an attachment. Structure, a separate building
That anyone could come in as far as inspection.
seems to invite a different type of use, I would think.
Heather, this seems like probably valuable. I think
Oh, definitely.
we have,
Yeah.
we have a wide range of accents. I feel like
I mean, I guess the point is you're not saying, no, we want anything to do with this. I guess that's the point, you know,
Right.
if you want them to put more time and effort into writing something up with some conditions to react to. Does that make sense?
Right.
Yeah, it does. Mark, you mentioned with if, just for discussion purposes, you allow it on more of the west side of town. You think that people would get, does it really add that much value? Oh, it does.
Yeah.
It does add value. I mean,
Yeah,
I
the
buy a
options are able to
property,
do
if I
it.
buy a property and I'm only gonna live there, and it's $1,000 a month for my mortgage.
Right,
I can offset it with 500 a month from the back.
right.
It increases. the
Keeping
value
in
of the
mind that you'd have to put on, I assume the way this means it has to be a totally separate unit,
No,
attached.
No.
property.
Attached
This
is
is, this
fine.
is saying that it
But
doesn't.
I get, no, but I mean, it can be attached, but there'd have to be, I assume, separate entry and exit. So, I don't know, whatever, bathroom, kitchen.
Right.
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 So it's separate unit, you know, maybe shared wall, shared floor, ceiling, whatever. So you'd have to add that on or remodel your existing, create. You'd have some upfront
Somebody will spend
investment.
some money,
Yeah,
like if
spend
the
some money.
property doesn't already have it
Right,
on site like that, I mean, you'll spend.
yeah,
Some
in the
properties-
garage.
Some properties matter, building another wall,
right.
building a wall to separate house. That would-
Yeah.
Can't be.
Yeah,
I haven't seen it done.
but
Be
say,
like you said, not legally.
Oh,
but
yeah. So you think the
already
part of
are.
town that already does not want or once the rentals regulated, doesn't want any more rentals, would be mad because other people are allowed to have rentals?
There'll be pushback.
I mean,
There's definitely a voice in town that wants less,
Rentals, period.
less people.
But
Yeah.
maybe they would be
But-
happy knowing that the
Yeah, they can't
owners
do
are
it. The
living
neighbors
next to
can't.
them or with them or
Well, what I'm kind of getting at is in their area, we're talking about, you can't do this, right? So what, backwards. But
maybe this is a way
It's
to
like we're
regulate.
backing out of telling people where and how they park. And kind of do,
Right,
or you can kind of not. Gonna get hairy.
And then the
Yeah.
west part of town can't take care of their parents and east part of town can.
Right.
And then if you have caregiving, you don't need to have a kitchen. I mean, say if the person doesn't need, and then in that case, if you put the restrictions to have the kitchen, you are letting people who really need that kind of ADU have to put a kitchen now when they won't use it. So for people who it's intended to use, won't be able to take benefit of it. When you really do have, and you will have in cases, you're putting those restrictions so that it doesn't become another rental, but then it also defeats the purpose in the first place why it started to.
Yes.
I can hear the thinking from here. Well, I get not easy issues, and again, I just wanted some initial feedback. Again, give it some more thought. I can send more articles if you want to read more about it. Like I said, there are very specific regulations. A lot of communities even design regulations. It has to match the existing house. You know, they're just, it's like, think of it as a blank slate. There's a lot you can do with it. Or you can say, I'm not interested. I don't think it's right for Bowling Green. That was it, unless you have questions.
No, I think that's plenty to chew on for all of us,
Yes. Yes.
considering it kind of looked like it was gonna be a short meeting too. So, with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Second,
Hold on.